I mean, I guess I've built a team. So I have built a team that the business can operate without me. That said, I have 14,000 clients that I've seen over the 20 odd years. And so a lot of those clients still want to see me. But people are pretty good about, oh, well, I'll wait 2 weeks till Rael's back in the office. So that's the first thing. The second thing is 8 years ago, I shifted my attention from this business, the mortgage business, where I was feeling a bit burnt out, to being a professional speaker and moving into the professional speaking circuit around the world. And so that's my pressure release. I got back from India and earlier this week. I was speaking in India at 2 conferences on the weekend. And so I got to go to a new country and experience new things. And that was my pressure release valve.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Growth. I'm your host, Devin Miller, a serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Rael Bricker. And Rael is going to be sharing a couple different growth stories. And so one of them is with regards to his educational business is going on in South Africa. And he'll talk a little bit about how they had no money. And so they had to get creative in their advertising as they were growing and finding customers, as well as how to advertise cheaply on lampposts and other things, and using going from a few students to a lot of students with that business. And then the second company we'll also talk about growing is the financial services business that grew out of being grew it by being on a stage talking about finance, and also share a little bit about developing a way to explain things in simple terms that made understandable for people, and how that was impactful. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Rael.
Thank you very much, Devin. Great to be here. And, as I always say to you, coming to you from the future.
All right. And for those of you that haven't caught it, Rael's not here in the U.S. And so he's here in the future on a different time zone. So welcome on. So yeah, so I gave a quick introduction to a couple businesses that you've been growing, but why don't we circle back and unpack those, and we can learn a little bit more about how you grew both of those businesses. So maybe starting a bit at the educational business that's there in South Africa. Tell us a little bit about, kind of as you were, after you started out, after you founded the business, and we're no longer just in figuring out what the business is, but in growth mode. How did you go about growing the business? What did you do, and what were the obstacles?
Okay, so, I put this into context. It was 1990, 1991. So no internet advertising, no Facebook, etc. So what did we do? So a bit of the story is we started a consultancy, and we weren't getting any consulting work because we were 26-year-old MBAs trying to teach the world how to run their businesses, and we'd never run a business at that point. So there's a bit of a flaw in our model there, but anyway, we started this education business because it was like we were so well qualified. We thought we'd do that. And we got our first 20 students literally by running very cheap adverts in the newspaper. And we got 20 students the first year, and we were very happy with that. Then we started thinking about, well, with limited money, what do we do? So there were 2 avenues or 3 avenues that we figured would make a difference in the business. And so we did do some serious thinking about, where do our students come from? And interestingly, today when I run strategy sessions for companies, and I do a lot of that 1- and 2-day strategy workshops, we look at this classification of customers and where are your A type and B type customers, and we actually go back into how did we acquire them, and let's go there to acquire more. And so, interestingly, when I go back, 30 odd years, that was exactly what we did. We looked at this and said, where do they come from? So there were 2 sources. The first of those was school kids, school leavers, finishing their final year at school. Not generally our target market was those who didn't get enough of in American terms, a GPA to get into a college or university. Okay. And so they were sort of stuck between this, going to drop out and go and work as at the checkout at the local supermarket, or study something. Okay. And so in South Africa, there was this concept of private colleges, which was really it's somewhere between a trade school and a very junior university in the US context. Okay. And they're private. So although we used external examinations, we actually were private, which was privately owned. So our students set an external examination, so the qualification wasn't our piece of paper that wouldn't be worth much. It was an external body validating what we were offering. Okay, so that's the context, right? So we worked out there were two ways we got students. One was students finishing year 12 at school and not knowing where to go. And the second group were adult learners who wanted to study part-time and expand their career into marketing and human resources and chartered secretary, company secretary, which is like a sort of like a CPA, but not as complex as a CPA qualification. So starting with the school leavers, this is so in the second year of the business, we did a number of things. The first thing we did was we contacted schools. So we literally sat with the white pages, the phone book, and got lists of schools, and we started with close to us and expanded. And I phoned the guidance counselors and said, we want to come and talk about alternative careers to university, and no one was doing that. So this was totally unique. All right. So we found our USP, our unique selling point, which was not every kid in your school is going to go to university. Some are going to go to technical college or do a trade or go to trade school. What about the gap in the middle? And the guidance counselors loved us for that. Okay, because we were doing something different. So we would arrive, we would do this talk about how there is alternative pathways, hand them all brochures, and that was, and then they go home, talk to their parents, et cetera, et cetera. And so that yielded us a lot of students. And it was a lot of work. It was physical work. It wasn't just, today we see guys, oh yeah, just set up your pipeline, set up your advertising on Facebook, and then your funnel will do everything, and it'll on, No, this was physically getting in the car, going out, but going back a step, we had brochures, which was a Z fold, right? So what you'd call a letter, and in Australia we call it A4, folded into 3, and we were printing these by hand, like our laser printer, and then turning them over because it wasn't a double-sided printer, and printing them and standing there and folding them. So a lot of guys who start businesses today forget about the fact that you actually have to do that stuff in your business. You can't day one go, yes, I'll get an assistant to do that, an assistant to do that. You could if you had lots of money. But the truth is you have to know every step of the process. Okay, I see you nodding a lot on the video, but that's...
And let me ask maybe just one question, even backing up just a little bit. So you figured that out and you said, okay, we've got a bit of a gap. It's not necessarily being well serviced or people haven't noticed it. But how did you figure out that, and you touched on it, but how did you figure out that there was a gap there and that was a good niche for you guys to drill down on?
Well, yeah, so we had the courses, and then we started analyzing the students that were coming to us in the first year. So in the first year, we ran some really, when I look back, I cringe because my wife had a scrapbook, and she cut out all the adverts out the newspaper and put them in a scrapbook for me. And I cringe at some of the stuff we did, and we were so proud of it, but it worked. So how do we work out the niche? I guess it was one of those light bulb moments. We kind of started thinking about who is our target audience. And both Jonathan and I, my partner and I, were both, he was a marketing specialist. His MBA had specialized in marketing. I mean, I had obviously done a lot of marketing through the MBA program. And so we were kind of in that academic almost mode of, analyzing the target market. But it worked well. The second part of that was our guerrilla marketing. So, and I'm unsure of the system in the US, but across South Africa, so even in Australia today, it's different, but across South Africa, on one particular day in December, all year 12 final school results were released. One day. The entire country's year 12 group were released on one day. And so end of our first year of operations, we said, let's do something different. So we printed posters that were A0 in size. Now, that's my height, and I'm 5'6". You know, they were massive posters, black and white, because we couldn't afford anything else. We had them printed and then backed up on cardboard. And we took the two cities at that stage that we were working in. We had opened a second office, a small one, and we employed unemployed people who were on the streets. And we said to them, this overnight, so that we knew the results were coming out on, say, Tuesday morning. Monday night, we put up 5,000 of these massive posters around each city that said quite simple things. Not happy with your results, call 1-800, whatever our number was at the time. It was as simple as that. And suddenly our phones rang hot because no one had ever tried anything like this. And a lot of people who called thought that we were the helpline for the education department. But we knew we were pushing the boundaries with what we did on the posters. But, you know, of those who weren't happy and didn't get the results, we went, you know, and we used that strategy for a few years in a row. And we had 20 students in 1990. And when we reversed it into a listed company in 1996, we had 4,000 students in 6 campuses. So that guerrilla advertising was amazing. And by the way, it took us another 2 years to employ a staff member just to go down and talk to the schools, because we still carried on with those talks at the schools with the guidance counselors. But John and I at that point were running a bigger business. And so that took us, you know, 2 or 3 years of us still doing those round trips before we actually employed someone else to do it.
Interesting. So no, I always like, it's always fun to hear the stories of guerrilla marketing and because I think people always have the misconception that even today they're like, well, you need to do Google AdWords, maybe do like a social media, Facebook advertising, and that's about it. And if it works, great, and it hits, and then you make lots of money. And if it doesn't, then you're out of luck. And I think that oftentimes even, that same thing would or likely work today. And people oftentimes will just overlook it or not think about it because they've been kind of narrowed in on just, hey, we've got one way to do it and let's just do it, do it that one way. And I love to hear that story. And so just out of curiosity, do you still do that today? Have you found better ways to do it, or kind of, it's interesting when you start out with guerrilla marketing, whether or not it's the best or whether or not it's the cheapest at the time, or kind of how it evolves.
Well, I mean, when I started the finance business, so stepping forward to Australia, so one more story about the education business was obviously the newspaper was your key document in those days. I mean, there was TV news, but every household got a newspaper. And every household, because there's no digital channel guides for your TV. And so every newspaper, local newspaper in a city, had a TV guide or a TV section of the newspaper. And that's where you found out what was on TV that day. And so we came up with another strategy where we approached 2 of the local newspapers and said, can we advertise on your TV guide page? Now, no one had ever advertised on the page of the TV guide before. And we figured out this logic in human behavior, that people would get home, read the newspaper, a typical father comes home, has his beer, reads the newspaper, and then they put the newspaper down with the TV guide showing so that the family could see what was on TV that night. And there would be our advert front and center in people's faces. And so the second thing, so we started that advertising as a paid advertising. So this was like year 2, we had a bit of money. But again, we did a deal with the newspapers that said, we're not going to book it, because they wanted a ridiculous amount of money to book that spot. And we said, and then our competitors started booking it, which was interesting. So for these young, knee-jerk startups, how suddenly our large competitors were following us. But we did a deal with them to be first on their standby list and pay 10%. if someone else canceled the advertising space. So we ended up advertising at least once a week because we would make decisions on the spot. They'd phone us and say, we've had a cancellation for tonight or for tomorrow night's paper. And we go, yep, we'll take the spot. And so we looked like we were spending hundreds of thousands on advertising, but in truth, we were just a standby advertiser and paying, 10,000. It was not we looked bigger than we were. And I think that was the other thing that we did, is everything we did made us look bigger than we were. So I'll fast forward to the mortgage business, because you asked about using the same strategy.
Well, and let me, before you go to the mortgage business, then we'll definitely jump there next. One of the questions, because where I'm interested, and maybe that's where you're going as well, but what I'm interested is, sometimes when you're young and you're scrappy as a business, you have to do the things that are cheap and they get you by, because that's the only thing that fits with your with your budget. And then as you get older, more mature, you find better ways and you have more money and you can go more expensive and you move away from those. And yet other times you say, hey, what works as well, but what originally worked as well when we started out still works as well. And just because we were guerrilla marketing young and scrappy doesn't mean it wasn't a good idea. So that's what I was kind of trying to tease out a bit.
I mean, I think the difference is that the print media is definitely dropped off for digital media. And so, and the problem is that digital media is still is far too controlled, if that makes sense. So in other words, you want to place adverts. So what's the equivalent today of the TV guide in the newspaper? I mean, I talked to my daughter who's 29 and she gets her news off Instagram. Now, that might sound a bit flaky, but she follows some of the really good news channels, and she follows their news feed on Instagram as opposed to watching TV, as an example. So, but what I mean is the advertising space is so controlled. In other words, you can place it, you can do this, you can do that. There's no, in that space, which is our current advertising model, I'm not seeing a lot of opportunity for guerrilla marketing, okay, in that space. But we still do physical guerrilla marketing, and I'll talk through that in a minute with the new businesses, okay? But
fair enough.
I think the principles are there. What do people do today? So there are a lot of marketing strategists in the current, 2020 plus world, where they're saying, okay, well, you've got to give value. So the difference, I guess, is give value, give value, give value, give value, and then ask for the sale. Okay. Whereas, when you were advertising in print media, you had no feedback loop as well. The only feedback loop you got was when you got calls from the advert. You never.
And then even what's even more, I think, compounding of that is you get the calls, or if you're doing multiple different channels or different campaigns, a lot of times it's even harder unless you have specific phone numbers for every single one, and really hard to track it. So it is kind of interesting how it's evolved.
Well, we actually built in tracking. So, so we were quite innovative at the time. We used different names. Okay. So what I mean is, when we ran, so there's a town called Durban, about 6 hours drive from Johannesburg. That was where we opened our first non-Johannesburg office, was in Durban. And we only had a part-time staff member. And so when she left in the afternoon, she would divert the phones to the Johannesburg office. And then we actually did that with all our regional offices. But what we did is we said in our advertising for Durban, we said, call Debbie. And we had specific names for the different advertising media we were using around the country. Then my staff were trained. Someone phoned and said, hey, could I speak to Debbie? A, we knew the call had come from a particular media in Durban because of the D for Debbie in Durban. But B, the standing answer was, sorry, Debbie's not here today. Can I help you? And that's how we tracked the media. So we were tracking our media spend through these fake names 30 years ago.
No, that's awesome. And I like the innovative way of, rather than having to set up multiple phone numbers and multiple, a much more complicated scheme, just simply have them ask for a different name or a different company name, company is a little bit harder because then it makes it a little bit even just a different name, and then it makes it easy to track. So I love that. So
and we pushed the name. So advertising said, call Debbie in capital letters, So, and if they said, oh, I need to talk to someone, you say, oh, then we'd ask them, where are they from? And we'd narrow down the media. And so then we would start going, well, we ran an advert last night and we got 20 calls from it and we converted 5. So we kind of get to the same, Google Analytics almost that you're doing now, Facebook ad analytics, but we were doing it very manually.
No, I like that. And I said, I think I love the ingenuity of, hey, we don't have the easy, I'll put in quote, easy analytics of just doing it digitally where everything is set up with cookies and, it almost feels like you don't have to track this much. And you say, we still need to know where our marketing spend is going and whether or not it's making money. And so you figure out, again, almost a guerrilla marketing way of doing that. So now, without maybe any further ado, because we've already spent a lot of time on the first business, which is really interesting, but tell us a little bit about growing the financial services business as well.
I mean, there was a couple of things I did. So the first was I started in 2001, and I had a business partner at the time. Now, I started this business, the financial services that I still own today, without ever having had a mortgage myself, because I had sold out in South Africa. I had cash when I came to Australia, and I'd bought my first property. So I'd never been through the process of getting a mortgage, and I came out of venture capital, and my objective was actually to help companies get investors or get capital into their business. And we did that, and then people said, that's great, can you get us a mortgage? And then I said, well, I don't know how, but I'll find out. And I found out what I had to do and how I got a license to do that, etc. So that was the story of the business. In 2000, that was 2001, 2002. I had a partner who was state manager of the local brewery, which is pretty good. But I learned lots about beer at that point. But he was just well connected. Like he had grown up in Perth. He was a professional sportsman at some point. So he had a big network. He wasn't very good at finance, but he had a great network. And so it was a good symbiotic partnership. So our first, 50 clients came from his network, him talking to people saying how brilliant I was. Now, that's an interesting concept, completely aside. When my friend of mine teaches networking, and people look at me, why does he have to teach networking? Well, if you go to a networking function and you meet someone and you say, hey, I'm Devin Miller, I'm the specialist, the best person you'll ever talk to about IP law, even though that may be true, they're thinking, God, this guy's an idiot. Like he's telling us how brilliant he is, like how do you do that? But if you go networking with a wing buddy, okay, and your wing buddy says, hey, have you met Devin? He's the most amazing person for IP law. I go, wow, that's amazing. But you didn't say anything. He's told your story. Okay. All right. So that was exactly what was happening in the mortgage business when we started. 2004, some guys I knew, I'd done some mortgages for them, approached me and said they were involved with a property sales organization, which was a dedicated property sales investment property organization. And they were looking for someone to work with them in Perth, in Western Australia. And they were coming over, and the chief executive, Kevin, who I'm very, very close to today, came over and he said, look, we're running a little public workshop. Can you come and talk about finance? I said, sure. And I've never been shy about speaking. In 1980, so many years before that, I was South African Toastmasters champion. So got up on this, there were 30 people in the room, and I started speaking about finance. And at the end of the evening, Kevin said, wow, we've never had a speaker who's used plain English. We've always had speakers who are ex-bankers, and they've spoken in bank speak. And I said, well, that's the way I am. I'm not a banker. I happen to be a finance broker, but I'm not a banker. And so he went, that's fantastic. Can you come along to our next seminar? By the way, can you fly over to the city where he lives, which is 5 hours flight, and go, can you come run some seminars there? And so for about 7 years, 8 years at that point, I was running around the country and internationally doing finance seminars for them. That's equated to about $1 billion of mortgages, just over $1 billion of mortgages, because I would stand up and explain things in a simple way, and people go, wow, I actually understood finance for the first time in my life. Let me go and make an appointment to go and see Rael and see what he can do for me. And I would sit across. So even today, 22 years later in that business, when I sit with a client, I use pen and paper. There's no computer in sight. I draw pictures for them, and I have a box of different colored pens on my desk, and I draw pictures that explain things in simple terms, in color coding for people. And so I think that was one of the keys to the success of that business, was explaining things without trying to be superior and use, bank speak, which makes you sound like you know what you're talking about, and but then people feel a bit stupid.
No, and I'm right there with you, because I think, I'm in an industry that I think that happens a lot with as well, which is the legal industry. And oftentimes you'll get attorneys that are just, they use legal terms and it's very complicated, and they refer to case law and everything else. And it makes them sound like they know what they're doing. And yet on the other hand, people will walk away and say, I have no idea what he just was talking about. And it makes it difficult. And even while it may make you feel smart, or may make you appear smart, you're not going to be able to help people, and they're not going to want to go with you. So I think that's a great takeaway of the difference between when you're trying to explain something. Are you trying to make yourself smell or feel like you're intelligent, know what you're talking about, and impress people, or you're trying to get down to their level and explain it to a way that they can explain, such that they can, that they have confidence that they'll be able to go with you and understand what you're doing. So I think that definitely makes perfect sense.
I mean, we use, I joke on stage when I still do finance, and I still do finance talks, 10 times a year, and I still generate a lot of business out of those. I don't do the 30 or 40 or 50 that I was doing, but that's for a different circumstance now. But I jokingly say, I'm not going to talk about TLAs on stage. And what's a TLA? It's a 3-letter acronym, but TLA is a 3-letter acronym of itself. Like it's kind of weird. A TLA, 3-letter acronym. And bankers tend to use bank speak, which is these 3-letter acronyms all the time, and assume people know what they mean. Like I'll use one, which is LVR, loan to valuation ratio. And you'll get bankers who'll just talk about LVR this and LVR that. And I see people's eyes glaze over when they talk. The second, I guess, thing we did, and it came back because I had the same business partner in 2004 that I was partners with in the education business. So my first partner in the mortgage business, I bought out, and then my previous partner from South Africa wanted to move to Australia, and so he invested in their business and bought a share of it. And we went back to our guerrilla advertising. We were walking one day in the local shopping center and past a real estate office, and outside each real estate office, there was a magazine stand of a free magazine called The Home Buyer. And it was a color magazine printed every single week with color adverts. Again, this is before the growth of the websites today, where you look at property on the website. Okay, this is pre that. So this is 20 odd years ago now. And so we saw these magazines standing on this thing, and people would walk past and grab a free magazine because it had this week's property listings. So we went, okay. We contacted the printer, the publishers, and said, we noticed nobody advertises on your front cover. Why do we think the front cover? Because every single person walking past there would see this advert on the front cover. So there was a lot of thought that went into it. And they said, no one's ever done that before. We said, great, give us a price. And they gave us a price, and we fell off our chairs when they told us what it would cost, because it was a full color, glossy cover, full color. And we went, okay, let's try it. And the number was $2,500 a pop a week. All right. And we went, okay, we'll try it for 4 weeks. We put $10,000 on the table, and we ran it, and we got, 100 calls per advert. And that was amazing. Like, the response rate was truly amazing. And so we then did a deal with them because then competitors started noticing and wanted to book it. So we did the same standby rate with them. Call us on the Friday for Monday's publication. And if you've got a standby spot, we'll do it, but we'll book one a month anyway. So we kept in their face by booking one a month for 12 months, but actually went on standby. So we had the same impression happening where we looked like we were spending a lot more money than we actually were. But it was incredibly, for about 4 years, probably, it was incredibly powerful. And then late 2000s, internet started coming up. The first websites started appearing where properties were listed on websites rather than in this publication. And so those 4 or 5 years were really, really good for us.
Awesome. No, that's a fun story to hear. And it's great to hear how you guys, seemed like kind of the common theme of, looking for different places that are often overlooked that can have a much bigger impact. And I think that's what you have to do is a lot of times as a startup or small business, as opposed to movies and the television shows and the books you read where they just have millions of dollars invested and they can just go right out of the chute. 99% of the businesses don't have this money to burn, and you do have to be scrappy and do those type of things. And I think a big difference between a successful business and one that flounders is so one people that can figure out where the business is not doing it, where they not are taking advantage of or gaps in the marketplace and advertising and marketing and how people are approaching it, and then utilize those gaps. So it was definitely fun to hear. So
one more very quick story. A client arrived here the one day, and I walked outside to greet him at the reception, and he took his glasses off and was cleaning them on the corner of his t-shirt. So, taking the t-shirt, wiping his glasses, and he goes, "Damn, I've just scratched my glasses," because it was a printed shirt with some screen printing on. Anyway, we're sitting down in my office, we're talking. He does the same thing on another part of his t-shirt and goes, "Damn, I've scratched my glasses again." So I thought about this afterwards, and I went, let's print. So our motto at the time was for clear vision of your financial future. And I said, well, hang on, clear vision, cleaning glasses, there's something in this. So we printed little 12 centimeter by 12 centimeter glasses, cleaning cloths. And I went to my graphic design. So the first design was horrible. It was so amateurish, like our advertising in South Africa. But then I went to my graphic designer, and he actually took an eye chart and actually built that slogan for clear vision of your financial future into that eye chart. And I've got a friend who was working in Shanghai at the time in China. He managed to source these for me at 12 cents each, individually wrapped in plastic. Okay. And so we ordered 5,000. I think we've been through about 25,000 at this point. Glasses, cleaning cloths are one of those weird things that people don't ever throw away. Okay. I'd have clients calling 5 years later going, "Oh, I've still got your cleaning cloth, and that's how I've got your number. I'm driving past your offices. Can I come and get some more?" And so my staff standard answer is, "Well, if you've got 20 minutes, let one of my staff review your mortgages for you." Okay. And so I still get, every time I do workshops and seminars, I still get people, thinking this is the most amazing thing. It cost me 12 cents and it's a physical thing.
No, and I think that's good. And I like, again, it kind of goes back to, it gives them something that's usable, something that they'll take around, and yet there's something that costs you very little and gets you a lot of or mileage out of it. So
yeah, so that's what it's about. That's what the Gorilla is about. It's about doing the thing. So the latest one we've done, two things we've done like in the last few weeks, is one is a magnetic to-do list in the shape of a house, got a house on the top of it. It's magnetic, it sticks on your fridge, and the pen, and it's a reusable, like a whiteboard. And it has a little dry wipe pen that also has a magnet on the lid that sticks next to it on the fridge. Okay, and again, people that we give that to physically go, wow. And I think those cost us, maybe $1 each, $1.20 each. Not a lot. One of my staff happened to see an advert on the internet for them. And we ordered a whole lot for the staff and gave them out over Christmas as Christmas presents. and great traction because now sits on someone's fridge every day with our number on and a reminder to call us.
No, I think that's I love all the different ways that you guys have figured out to continue to remind people of your services in unique and different ways that are less expensive and aren't just trying to blast it with the typical route. So it definitely is fun to hear. So well, we are wrapping towards the end of the episode, and so I always wrap up each episode with the same question. So we'll jump to that now, which is, when you're going along with your business, no matter what business is, how much you enjoy it, how exciting it is, at some point you're going to hit, a degree of burnout. And in other words, you're going to be worn out with the business. You're going to say, oh, just, it's hard to get yourself up and going every day. Maybe you have a bad day or bad week or bad month or sales or lows or any number of reasons why you get worn out with the business. And when you hit that point, what do you do?
I guess I built a team. So I have built a team that the business can operate without me. That said, I have 14,000 clients that I've seen over the 20 odd years. And so a lot of those clients still want to see me. But people are pretty good about, oh, well, I'll wait 2 weeks till Rael's back in the office. So that's the first thing. The second thing is 8 years ago, I shifted my attention from this business, the mortgage business, where I was feeling a bit burnt out, to being a professional speaker and moving into the professional speaking circuit around the world. And so that's my pressure release. I got back from India on earlier this week. I was speaking in India at 2 conferences on the weekend. And so I got to go to a new country and experience new things. And that was my pressure release valve. And, it was great fun. I didn't think about the mortgage business for 7 days while I was traveling to India and back. So that's been my release. That said, when I was at the peak of running this business and, we were doing, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in mortgages, exercise was my go-to because I think the endorphin serotonin relationship that you get from exercise is amazing. So my business partner and I at the time actually set our offices up right next door to a gym and went into the gym and did a deal with them, a contra deal where our staff could get access. And we encouraged all our staff to go there to burn off their steam, burn off, their burnout, so to speak. I've always exercised. I live, my office is 10 minutes from the beach. Chuck my bicycle into the car at 6 o'clock in the morning, go down to the beach, cycle 50 kilometers, have a swim, have a shower, have a coffee. And if I'm really feeling burnt out, I might take my laptop and sit at the beach and watch the sea and watch what's going on there. And at the same time, getting some work done, reading emails, but I'm in a different environment. So that's the other thing I do for burnout is I also work at home on a Wednesday. Now, why Wednesday? Because I don't want to encourage my staff to take long weekends all the time. So I chose a Wednesday to work from home. But a lot of those Wednesdays, I don't feel like working at my house. I will go to my local coffee shop. I will sit there. I'll have coffee. I might have a late breakfast at 11 or 12 o'clock. That's my pressure release valve. It's doing the same amount of work in a different environment.
No, I think that's great. And I think it's a great couple of, different ways to deal with the pressure. And I think everybody has to figure out the ways that work with them, whether it is exercise and the endorphin release, whether it's taking a day that you work from home, whether it's a couple weeks off a year, whether it's having a couple different businesses that you can switch between. So as you get burned out with one, you can or take a break and work on the other. I think those are all definitely great ways. So. Well, as we now wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
So railbricker.com is the website. The emails off the website come straight to me or rael@railbricker.com. And as usual, for your listeners, the free copy of my book called Dive In, Lessons Learned Since Business School, is at railbricker.com/free book.
Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate the giveaway to the listeners, as well as all the great piece of advice that you've shared. So, well, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, If you can help us to make sure to share these growth stories and reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey, just go click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. Also, if you ever need help along your journey with patents, trademarks, or anything else, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Thank you again, Rael, for coming on the podcast. Wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Yeah, thank you very much.